After racking up $300,000 in student loan debt, mostly from dental school, I became a huge Dave Ramsey disciple, hoping one day that I could call into his radio show and give my debt-free scream. But at that time, I thought that his way was the only way to build wealth. Heck, he even starts his radio show with what? Where debt is dumb, cash is king, and the paid off home mortgage replaces the BMW as the status symbol of choice. Now, this is what Dave teaches. Dave teaches one way and one way only. All debt is bad. But my question to you today, is that really true? Now, when you grow up and you learn something that's bad, whether, let's just say alcohol or drugs or whatever, and if you hear that constantly from your parents, teachers, coaches, all the time, then no matter what others say, you're probably going to think it's bad, right? Now, Dave instructs us to focus on paying off all of our debt. And once that happens, never, ever, ever go back into debt for the rest of our lives. Because he knows that for his get out of debt strategies, which he calls the 7 baby steps to financial peace, he's made millions and millions of dollars off of it, right? So for those of you that aren't too familiar with the 7 baby steps, here's a very, very quick, brief recap. Step number 1, $1,000 in emergency fund. Step number 2, pay off all of your debts, smallest to largest. He calls that the debt snowball, everything but the house. Step number 3, finish funding the emergency fund with 3 to 6 months of living expenses. Step number 4, invest 15% of your household income into either Roth IRAs and or pre-tax retirement accounts. Step number 5, fund your college funds. Step number 6, pay off your home early. And then step number 7, continue to build wealth and then give it away. Now, these 7 baby steps have really helped thousands of people, probably hundreds of thousands of people, including our family, get out of debt, start building wealth. But again, is Dave's way the only way to financial success? So for those that follow his advice, debt becomes a 4-letter word. And we're taught that the only way to live is by being debt-free and that we should cut up our credit cards. Now, I understand that for some people, this is great advice, because if you're the type of person that can't control your spending, then it would probably be a good idea to get rid of the, quote, MasterCard. That only makes sense. Just like somebody that used to be an alcoholic, probably a good idea that if they're really not able to control their drinking, then they should, stay out of the bars. But there are others like myself, and probably you, that can control their spending and know how hard and how inconvenient it is to try to live today without a credit card. So for instance, it would be difficult to book a flight, check into a hotel room, rent a car. How about shopping online, shopping at Amazon, going out to dinner, all kinds of things? It'd be very difficult, be very inconvenient to do. I'm not saying it can't be done. It would be a very, very inconvenient way to live. But the more that I've learned about money and the more that I've learned about debt, I've come to the realization that there's 2 types of debt. There's both good debt and there's bad debt. And I think once you understand what both are and how you can use both of them, then you'll be able to apply it to your life a lot better. So let's start off with bad debt. Bad debt is typically thought of as debt that's going to take money away from you. It's going to take money out of your pocket, okay? On things such as student loans, credit cards, car loans, that sort of thing. Now, let me talk a little bit about student loan debt because, depending on who you listen to or what you think, for me, this type of debt is questionable because it could be good debt, but yet it also could be bad debt. Let me give you an example. If somebody takes out student loans and they're the type of person that has no direct career path and they wander aimlessly from college to college, 7, 8, 9 years, they don't know what they're doing. They never graduate. They're always changing majors. Then yes, if this person were to fund that type of financial career, it would be considered bad debt. But if somebody went to college, they had a direct path, let's say they wanted to go to medical school or law school, DO school, pharmacy school, whatever, and they plan not to go overboard, only taking out the bare minimum needed to get by, then this could be considered good debt. Most of the poor and the middle class, they spend their entire lives working to pay off all of their debts to cover their liabilities, such as cars, four-wheelers, boats, TVs, vacations, etc. And I've also learned the way that the rich, the way that they use debt and the way that the poor and the middle class use debt, completely different. So that was bad debt. Well, let's talk about what is good debt. Good debt is debt, unlike bad debt. Good debt is debt that's going to put money back in your pocket by allowing you to buy assets that will go up or increase in value and or pay you income. So speaking of income, if you haven't already downloaded the passive income guide I've put together for you, you can actually click the link below this video, and once you download it, you'll be on your way to learning how to get out of the rat race once and for all and stop trading your valuable time for money. All right, so an example of this type of good debt would be somebody that's taking out a loan for a rental property. Again, this would be considered good debt, as long as the asset, of course, is cash flowing, and the cash flow that you get from your tenants would pay your debt payment, plus, again, excess money would put money in your pocket. The rich use this kind of debt to buy assets or create products, as they know that what? Debt's essential to the American economy. Because think about it, without debt, our whole economy would collapse, because what is it based on? Inflation, right? And what encourages inflation? Debt. All right, question. Would you consider your debt that you have now, or maybe if you're thinking about getting some debt, is it constructive or is it destructive? One of the reasons I started this YouTube channel and also my blog was to educate you. You know, as I'm learning things, I think it's important that I share it with you, just like when you learn things, I think it's important that you share with others. Now, I'm not perfect by any means, but as I continue to learn what I think would be best for you, I'll simply just pass it along. So when you're out there scratching your head trying to figure out, if I take out this loan, would it be good or would it be bad? Here's three popular approaches that can help you. So help you know the difference. Number one, debt instead of discipline. Now, what I mean by that is, and we talked a little bit earlier, debt can be destructive when it's used because planning and self-discipline were not. So if you think that, if you're the type of person that thinks that getting a bunch of credit cards, that they possess this magical capacity to create wealth because you're getting all these points, then maybe it's time to cut them up, okay? Debt instead of discipline. All right, number two, debt instead of delay. And if we're out there listening to and following some of these quote financial gurus' way of thinking regarding never, ever, ever taking out debt, then guess what? We never have a home. And sometimes you have to weigh, well, okay, if I've got a family, is it worth me saving up for 15 or 20 years to pay cash for a home versus taking out a mortgage and living in a home with my family, building memories and experiences, because you typically only have one shot to do that most of the time. So constructive use of debt allows this, especially when lenders out there are basically selling money at all-time lows. And then number three, debt instead of diversion. Now, think about this. How many wealthy people do you know out there that have millions and some of them billions of dollars? So they have enough assets to pay off their home mortgage, right? I'm sure you know some of those people. And I'm sure that they understand by doing this, they become debt free. But why is it that they choose instead not to? Why don't they pay off their house? Well, it's because if they know that they could use the extra money that they would be paying off their house to invest in businesses, to invest in real estate that's going to continue to grow their net worth, continue to grow their wealth. And they understand that keeping some debt so that they can invest instead, so debt instead of diversion can be their best choice. So think about this. Debt is nothing more than a magnifying tool. So it makes bad financial decisions worse, and it also makes good financial decisions better. All right, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about one of the financial gurus that I really enjoy reading and talking about, and that's Rich Dad Poor Dad author Robert Kiyosaki. And let's take a look at what he has to say about debt. Now, he's the type of person, he doesn't care if you have a mortgage on your house or not, because he's the type of person, him and Grant Cardone, that feel that a house is a liability. But we're always taught what, that's the American dream, do everything you can, buy a house, that's the best asset you ever have. Yet him, Grant Cardone, and others think it's a liability. And he knows that the rich buy assets, of course, but he also knows that the poor and the middle class acquire liabilities that they think are assets. And his reason actually starts with knowing 6 words, okay? 6 words that are the basics of financial intelligence, which are on the diagram that he pretty much has in all of his books, especially Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that is this: income, expense, asset, liability. And the other two are cash flow. So what I like to do first is draw out what he talks about as a cash flow pattern of somebody in the poor and the middle class. So when you look at the average person, they have a job, right? So they have a job, and then money comes in at the top. You got money coming in, and then it goes down. They have a liability. Their liability creates an expense, and then it goes out just like this. So, for instance, house. Well, what's the expenses going to be on a house? Well, it's going to be you're going to have taxes, mortgages, upkeep, repairs, maintenance, all sorts of things. Other liabilities, credit cards, they're going to create expense, right? They're going to take money out of your pocket. Cars, they're going to create expenses. Car loans, they're going to take money out of your pocket. So all of those things are, and again, that's the typical cash flow pattern of somebody like that. When I got out of dental school, and for the first few years of practicing in my practice, that's pretty much what my cash flow pattern looked like too. All right. But now let's take a look at what the cash flow pattern of somebody that's wealthy. It's very simple. They invest in assets that what? Pay you income. Now, folks, I went to school, 4 years of high school, 4 years of dental school, and 4 years of residency, and was never taught anything like this. What is that? 16 years of school? This right here. I mean, this is stuff that you would have thought they would have taught this in high school to us. Well, they may now, but I didn't get this at all. I don't know. Maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. But once you learn this, I really strongly encourage you to teach this to your kids as well, because they need to know the difference between an asset and liability. And an asset can put money back in your pocket, and the liability takes money out of your pocket. Now, one thing that Kiyosaki, one of his big lessons is it really doesn't matter what type of asset that you get, or liability that you get, or whatever. Doesn't really matter what the debt is on, so to speak. It could be a car, could be a house. But think about this: if if your car is being used by an Uber driver, or if you have a house that somebody's renting from you, where's the cash flow ultimately going to? Actually, the money is actually going back to you, right? But if you had a car that you drive or a house that you live in, the money's going out. But somebody rents from you, they're paying you income. Somebody's driving your car or you're driving your car, Uber, money's going back in your pocket. So again, if the cash is flowing into your pocket, into your income statement, then that's considered an asset. It really doesn't matter what the asset type is. That's what it is. It's good debt. Okay. So you need to realize that, don't just think, okay, my home or my car, it's a different way of thinking. And remember, if it's taking money out of your pocket, it's bad debt. Good debt puts money back in your pocket. So if you're going to be successful, whether or not you're an employee, you're self-employed, you're an entrepreneur, you've got to control this, the direction of your cash flow. Is it going out or is it going back into you? And most people, what do? They go out, they get a job, and the cash flows, again, it goes out to expenses that these liabilities create. If you're an employee, if you're self-employed, you're paying big taxes. You're paying a lot of expenses to taxes to the government. But successful people don't operate like this. And it's the reason that successful people are entrepreneurs, they're not employees. So really the bottom line out of this whole thing that we're talking about today is get out of bad debt and get into good debt. Now, when in doubt whether or not to use debt, if you're looking to make a purchase, here's a good rule of thumb. Again, if you want to pass this along to your kids, that would be great, especially if they're in college. Never use debt to acquire a depreciating asset. Never use debt to acquire a depreciating asset. So a depreciating asset is something that won't gain monetary value over time. The chances of getting back what you paid for it initially is slim to none. Think about a new car. You go buy a new car, you pay $35,000, you drive it off the lot. You could go back probably the next day. You're not going to get your $35,000 back, right? And remember that bad debt can make you poor as it's used to buy liabilities. And then the good debt, that can make you wealthy, again, if it's used for the right reasons, such as for investment property or to purchase equipment, if you have a business that's going to make you a return. In my practice, I have to look at those things too. Should I buy a new x-ray machine, a new cone beam 3D machine? Is that going to allow me to make a return on that money that I'm putting? Should I take out a loan for that or not? So that's the kind of things you have to look at. And this is the type of debt, again, that you need to think about when you're buying your assets. So one last thing that I want to go over, and it will help to package all this up for you, is an example, a real estate example that we can use. And I'm going to really make this as simple as possible for you. But I get quite a few people that come to me, and I don't know what it is about the $100,000 mark, but that always seem to want to start with $100,000. All right. So they come to me and they go, "Hey, Jeff, got 100 grand. What should I do with it? Or I'm thinking about doing some rental properties. Or what do you think about this?" So let's use $100,000. Okay. So we'll try to keep this as simple as possible. So let's say you got 100 grand. You want to invest in some rental property. You want to be an active investor. You want to, which I don't do, but maybe you want to do, you want to be a landlord. You want to get into it. So you could come over here and take old Dave's advice, and you could save up your 100 grand, and then you could pay cash for one property if you can find a $100,000 rent house. Depends on where you live. Or you could use good debt, and you could actually take that $100,000 and you could split it up and buy 5 properties. So if you went to the bank would lend you 80 grand for each property. So you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's my drawings today of the property. So you got 5 properties, right? And so they would lend you $80,000 for each, which means you would need to come up with 20% each. So you would put down 20 grand on each, or your $100,000. Okay, so you have five $20,000 down payments for 5 rent houses. Follow me so far? Let's just assume, let's assume a 5% interest rate. And let's also assume that each loan payment, each of these loan payments is going to be around $500. All right, follow me so far? So in this scenario, we're going to assume that each of these properties, the rent, they're going to rent for 800 bucks. All right. And then also we're going to deduct our $500 payment. $300. Okay. Let's just say that the $500 payment, that includes taxes and insurance. Okay. So in this scenario, the cash flow from each of these properties is $300 a month. All right. Times 5. That's going to give us $1,500 a month. So for five rentals, $1,500 a month. And if you calculate that, which I did that ahead of time, so I wouldn't have to try to figure out math on here. But if you're making $1,500 a month on a $100,000 investment, you are in the neighborhood of about a 18% annual return on your money. Versus if you would have taken that $100,000 and bought one property, you'd be looking at about 8 or 9% return on your money, which is not bad, but would you rather have 18% or would you rather have half that? So another thing, you can go out and you can research other articles, other YouTube videos, other podcasts, whatever, on specific ways that you can use debt to generate income and to continue to build wealth. And you're going to find all kinds of stuff out there. Because when I was researching for this video to prepare for you, there was stuff about margin investing. There was stuff about leveraging ETFs, getting into hedge funds, short selling, all kinds of stuff. If that's something that interests you, which it doesn't me, but if it interests you, hey, go for it. I'm all for it. No matter how you want to use debt to build wealth, it all starts with educating yourself, again, about the difference between good versus bad debt, then making a mindset shift to only focusing on using good debt to your advantage. And speaking of building wealth, I want you to check out this next video right here, where I highlight the top 6 rich dad, poor dad lessons that I learned from the man himself, Robert Kiyosaki. See you in the next video.